Hello, and a big welcome to all of you out there who are listening and seeing this podcast. Today we have another podcaster, Kaitlin Hendry. Welcome to you.
Thank
It's
you.
fantastic to have you here, but you also do other things than podcasting, I assume. So we
Yes.
are going to talk about that today. So nice to have you here. Please tell us where do you come from and what are you doing?
I am in Virginia in the United States, right outside of DC, the capital of the United States, for those who might not know.
Yeah?
Um, I am starting a new business. It's about 2 years old. It's called Equine Performance Identities. And it was born through this love of horses and also this love of really understanding what makes people or horses tick, what motivates them, what certain things can you do to bring out the best in people. And I had a whole career with horses. I worked for an FEI show jumper for a couple of years, and I was a working student for an eventer, and I rode and worked with horses growing up for many, many years, and I always loved horses. But I burnt out a little bit on the horse world because I was a groom, and grooms, well, I mean, just really any career in the horse world is tough because you really only
Mm.
have Mondays off if you're at a show barn because you're traveling, and it's tough. So I ended up going to college and I got my undergraduate bachelor's degree in management, in business management, but I focus a lot on the people aspect of managing a business. So I took a lot of classes rooted in psychology, and I was able to still focus on how to help people be their best at work. And
Mm.
through that career, I was introduced to a psychological trait theory by William Moulton Marston, who was the first psychologist to look at quote unquote normal behavior in people. And through his work, he developed this psychological trait theory. And with my work with people and in the business space, I became certified and very skilled at using a tool called predictive index, which is based on that trait theory. And it's basically a personality profiling tool to help people understand themselves better. Like, I'm so drained by this job. And it's because you're doing a lot of things that don't come naturally to you. And so that takes more energy, just like if you were to write your signature with your non-dominant hand. You can still be good at it. You could practice and get good at it, but it's always just going to take your brain more energy than if you just signed with your dominant hand. So, by understanding your personality profile, you can figure out which behaviors and which aspects of your job will give you energy versus drain you, or how your manager can support you in a way that meets your personality profile needs, or if you have a conflict with a team member, what might be driving that and how can you address it and learn to work together and all those sorts of things. And I was still had my own horses on the side, and I always kind of kept one foot in the horse industry. Honestly, it's hard to leave. It's when you
Yeah,
love
it
horses
is.
so much, you can't really just leave.
No.
um and I was like, okay, well, horses have personalities too, so why can't we do personality profiles for horses? So a couple of years ago, I dove into creating this tool, Equine Performance Identities, or EqPI, as I call it for short, because that is quite a mouthful. It's basically a 10-minute online survey. It's not timed. You can take as long as you want, but it's an online survey, which you can find on my website. And it asks you which behaviors you observe and how often you observe them. And using your inputs, I'm able to create a personality profile for your horse based on that psychological trait theory. And so through this work, of course, I don't want to make the assumption that everything that works for people works for horses, because I don't want to fall into that trap. And so I'm constantly testing my assumptions and learning as I go. And it's been a journey, and I'm meeting lots of really cool people and learning lots of cool stuff about horse personalities. And I'm excited to share it with you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And why not? Why not personality on horses? And you use this a lot when you are going to have a job or in this industry. And can you use this also for competition or anything?
Yeah, of course. I mean, as one of my uh, journeys or legs of the journey in this process, I started my own podcast called Inside Equine Minds. And I meet with trainers, riders, grooms, all of various horse professionals that work with these really successful horses in different disciplines. I have an episode out now with Anna Buffini, who was a dressage on the short list for the Olympic dressage team for the US. I have an episode with Laura Kraut and her horse Baloo, who's her two-time Olympic horse in show jumping. Lots of really great people. John French, who's Hall of Fame hunter rider. I know hunters isn't as big in Europe, but he's really, really big name in the US for the hunters. So yeah, I mean, I've talked with all these people in the competition space, and you're right. When we work with horses, even if you don't really, believe, quote unquote, in profiling, you can't deny that these horses have their individual personalities. And
Of
so
course. Mm.
anytime we talk about them, it's really hard to talk about them without mentioning some aspect of personality. And so I talk with these horse professionals on my podcast to get a sense of how that horse's personality has influenced their success in that discipline or has influenced the way they manage the horse or prepare them for competition or different riding tips that they have found has worked for that horse based on their horse's personality. And so it's really cool then. And in the podcast, they've done a profile for that horse. And as they're talking about what they have found works for that horse, I'm tying it back to that horse's personality profile. And so it gives listeners an opportunity to see how the profile can be used and how it can inform and help you make more educated decisions on how to support your horse, because truly we want our horses to be happy,
Mhm.
and that is the goal, hopefully. I mean, maybe there are some people out there that just want to win the ribbon and whatever, but those are not my people. My people are the ones that care about their horse's well-being, and I know that you and your Happy Horse Hub have really put horse welfare at the center of things, and that's what I want for EqPI. Is I want horses to thrive because they're understood at an individual level, and we are adapting to meet that individual horse's needs beyond their need as a horse. Of course, we need to also consider their needs as a horse as far as being herd animals and forage first diet and that sort of thing. But once we've met those needs, then we have to consider the individual needs of that horse's personality, and EqPI helps you accomplish that.
Mm. Yeah, so you can sort of help your horse if you make this profile and see what. Uh, I have to ask, do you have it up in what you call it boxes? Oh, this is a profile here, or this horse is like that, or how do you do it? Is it all individual, or do you have some forms or anything you go through?
Like, are there kind of standards? Is that what
Yes,
you're?
yes.
So the psychological trait theory has four spectrums of behavior or four traits. And these spectrums, based on your inputs, I'm able to kind of determine where your horse falls on each of these spectrums.
Mm,
So the spectrums are independence, which is the horse's preference to either control or comply. Then extroversion, which is the horse's preference to interact or isolate. Stability is the third spectrum, which is the horse's preference for predictability or variety. And then structure, which is the horse's preference for clarity or flexibility. So, whether the horse, when you give me your inputs, I determine where that horse falls on the spectrum, and I use terms like high, situational, or low. So if a horse is high independence, then they prefer control, or more autonomy in their work. And so when you're working with them, it's best to kind of set them up so that way they're kind of making their own decisions. Or if you're not able to do that while you're riding them, you need to make sure that need is being met elsewhere. So that way that frustration doesn't build, because also high independence horses are comfortable with conflict. And so if they're frustrated, they're going to let you know, and you're going to get more stubbornness, more anger potentially. And so, in order to mitigate the challenging aspects of a particular spectrum, you need to meet that spectrum needs. So that way you get the positive aspects. Because there's no good or bad profile. Every spectrum has good or bad things about it. And by managing and working with a horse in a way that meets those needs, then you can mitigate and help kind of stay on top of those challenging aspects. And then, in addition to looking at those four individual spectrums, I also look at how those spectrums relate to each other. So, one example is if a horse is high independence and high extroversion, then they're going to be much more social in your face because they have the confidence from the high independence. High independence horses are very self-confident. And with the high extroversion, they're more social and curious and playful. And so they're more likely to be right in your face when they're meeting you, or digging through your pockets for treats or those sorts of things. If they're low independence and high extroversion, then the low independence horses don't have as much self-confidence, and they're much more conflict averse. They want to please, they're very willing, they're very sweet. And so they're not going to be a super in your face social horse, even though they're high extroversion. They're going to be more kind of sweet and cuddly about it. And so you have to really look at that whole picture. And I think that's really what sets EqPI apart from there have been other models out there. And personally, I feel like they're a bit oversimplified. And even though EqPI only has these four spectrums of behavior, by also looking at how those spectrums relate to each other, we really get that big picture, and it can be very individualized. It's still very easy to understand, and the reports that you get are very simple. And you can always schedule a consultation with me if you want to know more. But I want to keep it simple, but also not oversimplify. I want it to be easy to understand and still allow for those nuances in individual personalities.
Wow. Do you also give advice what to do when you found out what personality your horse has?
There are some things in the profile itself. The profiles, at least right now, are very inexpensive. I did that intentionally. They're only 35 US dollars right now because I really want to help as many people connect with their horses as possible. And so I didn't want money to be a barrier in getting that initial profile. And so there's some in there as far as how to work with your horse, but not super extensive because, again, I wanted it to be very kind of simple and not overwhelming to receive. But again, people can always schedule a consultation with me to dive in deeper. If there's a specific challenge that they're facing, I can provide some suggestions based on that horse's profile and what might work for that horse. I also, in the podcast Inside Equine Minds, I'm talking with these professionals about riding tips and management tips. And so if you get a profile for your horse and you realize that your horse has a similar profile to one of these horses that I've interviewed about on the podcast, then there are tons of tips in there. And I hope to one day develop a training package or different kind of add-on reports that you can purchase based on your horse's profile. And that's one of the goals of the podcast, in addition to kind of showing people how it can be used, is to put together a bunch of themes and develop these reports based on what these professionals have figured out works for these different profiles.
Wow, yeah. And I'm sitting here and thinking that when you talk to people who are really high in competition, sometimes they have one horse and they go all the way because they know each other and all
Mm-hmm.
these things. But sometimes the horse, yeah, will get old, or you can't have them all the time. Could it help to have this profile, and when you are buying a new horse, to go out and see, can I find a horse with the same profile as my old one was?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really great use case for EqPI is that horse rider match. Um, Even if it's not the exact same profile as your other horse, you have a much better understanding of what this new horse's needs are, and can you realistically meet that horse's needs, or is that going to be what you need in your partner, your new equine partner, and if so, then how can you adjust the way that you have been working to now meet this new horse's needs to get the best out of them. And I think there's a lot of scenarios and examples of when a horse just wasn't doing that great with one rider and then they're sold,
Mm,
or their owner gives a ride to a different trainer and then the horse does amazing,
mm,
and it just all comes down to meeting that horse's needs. And one example, I think, when I was researching stuff for my podcast, I found the story of Seabiscuit, the racehorse.
mm,
And confirmation wise, Seabiscuit, like you wouldn't look at him and think like this is going to be a great racehorse. He was really awkward.
mm,
He had huge knees. Like he was just not, a horse that's screamed racehorse when you looked at him. And he didn't do well in his first couple years, and then he was sold and got to a new trainer, and this new trainer completely changed the way that he worked with Seabiscuit. I mean, he got a new jockey, which also, the story goes the jockey was enormous and like didn't really, it was just an awkward pair. But they had a buddy horse that traveled with Seabiscuit. He always had a buddy. Like there were just certain things that he did to figure out how to get Seabiscuit to be happy and to enjoy his career as a racehorse. And then now he's famous and everyone knows his name. And
mm.
so I think there's a lot of applications as far as buying and selling. I know you've done some breeding. I was reading on your website that you've done some breeding. I think there's really cool applications there as well. And as well as training. And I mean, there's so many different applications. And like I said earlier, and like you mentioned, you can't talk about horses without some element of their personality coming up. And so why not have a standard way to talk about personality so we're all using the same terminology?
Yeah, you're right. You can have siblings that are totally not the same. I have seen that many times.
Yeah, it would be really cool to do additional research or to partner with some breeders to kind of understand how are those traits similar or different from their parents and their lineage.
Mm.
It's just a really interesting. I always ask people in my podcast about nature versus nurture and what their experience is in personality development and which one they feel like has more influence.
Yes, I have seen from as I said, siblings that one are like the mother and the other is like the father, but you can always find their personality in one of the parents.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I had someone on my podcast who was talking about cloning and
Yeah.
how it came up in the nature versus nurture question because I asked her which one she felt had more of a difference. And I think she was leaning towards nurture, if I remember correctly, because these people that are cloning these really successful horses, almost none of the clones, even though the DNA is identical, none of them have reached the level of success as the horse they were cloned from. And
Wow.
I'm an identical twin. And my twin and I have different personalities. So it's just really an interesting conversation. And I think maybe that's why there's some skepticism around profiling personalities because there's so much unknown around how personalities are developed or where it comes from, or we
Hmm.
there's just so much we don't know. But it is a really interesting topic of conversation.
Yeah, really. I have also two sons, and they are totally different.
Yeah.
But they've grown up in the same house and with the same parents and everything. So
Hmm.
yeah, it is very interesting.
Hmm.
So, and you can recommend this to everybody to take this test.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it only takes about 10 minutes of your time. Like I said earlier, it's untimed and you can take as long as you want, but it typically only takes about 10 minutes. It's available on my website, which is equineperformanceidentities.com. If you wanted to listen to my podcast, Inside Equine Minds, it's available on pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts. It's on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, all the places. And so you're welcome to follow along and listen to how these profiles influence. I also have example profiles on my website if you wanted to see one before you purchased one. And then I have a Patreon account as well for my podcast. If you wanted to see the profiles of the horses who are featured on the podcast, the profiles
Hmm.
are available for purchase on the Patreon. And then my Patreon members also get early access to the episodes and a discount code for an EqPI consultation with me if you wanted to dive deeper into your horse's personality profile. So lots of different ways you can get in touch. But if you want to start somewhere, you can start with my website, which is www.equineperformanceidentities.com.
Hmm. Have you been helping people when they are going to find a new horse, or it's always an existing one?
Most of my experiences have been with people who already have the horse. Um, I have used it myself in buying and selling. As far as I now that I've spoken to so many people, I have gotten fairly good at observing a horse and
Hmm.
determining their profile. Um, Initially, it's just been through the survey where I've kind of collected somebody's inputs who is already familiar with the horse. Uh, but I hope to someday be able to just, if it's a rescue and you have no idea what the background of the horse is, to be able to just go and interact with the horse for a day or so and be able to just write the profile to make sure that the horse is starting that relationship on a good foot.
Hmm.
But for now, the best way to get a profile is through the survey, the online survey.
Yeah.
Once you know the horse, I would say if you interact with the horse frequently, I would say a month is probably plenty of time to be able to get enough information about the horse's behavior to take the survey. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah. Because you maybe you could see that um, you don't buy the wrong horse, because
Yeah.
I've heard so many people do that.
Yeah.
They come out and say, "Wow, it's a beautiful eyes it had," and when it come home, it's not that the one
Yeah.
they thought it was.
Yeah. Well, and there are a lot of sales websites that do have some sort of temperament scale, but it's
Mm-hmm.
usually like a 1 to 10 scale. And that's it's not really that helpful because you're like, okay, well, what's my eight compared to your eight? Or what is an eight? Like, I don't
That's
know it,
right. That's right.
And
Yeah.
so it'd be really cool, in addition to partnering with breeders, it'd be really cool to partner with either sales websites or sale barns to develop profiles for these horses so that way they can have the right match. I mean, these sale barns in particular, their reputation is based on these sales and how honest they are and how good the match is. And
Hmm.
what's one more data point to be able to make sure that that sale and that match is going to be beneficial for everyone involved.
Mm.
I think it's a smart business decision, honestly, because if you have a happy horse, you're much less likely to have injuries or ulcers or,
Mhm.
you know, behavior issues with training and all of those sorts of things. Like it's a $35 profile. It certainly can't hurt, you know what I mean? To be able to understand your horse better.
Mm. That's right. That's right. Yeah, maybe you should contact sellers, horse sellers, to do this.
Yeah.
When you buy a horse, they have a profile that would be fantastic, I
Yeah.
think.
I
Hmm.
think people would really appreciate that honesty
Yeah.
up front.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Very interesting and yeah, specialized
Mm-hmm.
and very good for both horses and human, so we can understand each other much better.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
great thing.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else you want to give today to the people?
I would just, I mean, I really appreciate that there's kind of this wave of horse welfare that has been happening in the last decade. And
Mm.
I think that this is just another element that people can use to really understand their horses and really create a true partnership and true engagement with their horse, where their horse isn't just doing what they're told just to survive, like they're a willing partner. And in addition to saddle fit and body care and good hoof care and nutrition, like this is just that additional psychological element of really understanding horse welfare. So I
Mm.
just encourage you to take the plunge and give it a try. And of the people that have taken it, I always ask for people for their feedback on the reports. And as far as accuracy goes, it's 90% accurate. And when I ask people, I usually ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, how accurate is it? 10 being perfect. And people are usually like, oh, I would give it a 9. Yeah, it was really, really accurate. And then I ask them, well, what was there anything in particular that wasn't accurate? What can I do to get it to a 10? And
Mm.
then they read the profile again. They're like, actually, maybe I should give it a 10 because it was really, really accurate. There's nothing that's not accurate. Like, I think there's just people are much less likely to give things the best rating because there's always sort of an element of unknown. So it's very, very accurate. If it's not accurate, please let me know because, again, I'm still learning. And so any feedback that I can to tweak my profiling is helpful. And I'm happy to make sure that your horse gets an accurate profile. And then people who try it, 9 out of 10 would recommend it to others. So I think it's just getting the word out there and taking the plunge and giving it a
Mm.
try because I've gotten really, really great feedback. I do realize that is a bit of a weird thing. And so it's going to take some time for people to try it and adopt it. And so here's me encouraging you in my completely unbiased opinion that it is a great tool. So yeah, that would be my additional add is it really will help you understand your horse better and have a better relationship with them.
Mm. And maybe yourself as well, because now you're talking about they giving it a 9, not a 10. Maybe they have a little bit like this, and
Yeah.
they don't want to see that this is accurate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can it be that way, or it's only the horse?
Well, there's definitely, because it's an online survey, obviously I can't ask the horses to complete the survey about themselves. With people and the trait theory, it was a self-assessment, so it was based on your own inputs. Obviously, I can't do that with horses. So there is an element of bias tied in as far as I'm relying on people's interpretations of their horse's behavior.
Mm.
Um, I think that's mitigated in the sense that for each spectrum of behavior, there are multiple um, characteristics on the survey that align with that spectrum. And so, based on like how many of those traits or characteristics you selected can help mitigate some of the bias if you picked one that was misinterpreted behavior.
Mm.
I also, on the plan for EqPI, is to create a survey where I'm getting inputs from multiple people. So
Yes.
I'm not just relying on one person's
Mm.
interpretation. I'm
Yeah.
relying on two or three people's interpretation, which can hopefully help to mitigate some of that individual bias. So yeah, obviously I'm still learning, we're still developing the tool, and it's gonna just continue to get better and better. So if it's a 9 out of 10 accuracy now, hopefully in a couple of years it'll be a
It's
10 out
it's
of 10.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thumbs up. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for coming here and speaking about that today. It's very interesting, I think, and I hope you out there also think it's a good idea, a new idea, but everything to help the horse, to help human and horses understand each other in the right way.
Yeah.
That is a good thing.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. I do think it can be a really beneficial tool for the horse industry, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to spread the word.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. So thank you so much for being here today, Kathleen, and thank you to all of you out there who have been listening and seen this podcast. And please subscribe. It is helping me to meet new people and interesting people like today. So thank you so much for today and see you soon again.
Thank you.